I'd like to call this evening's King's Board of Education work session to order. Mr. Morrow, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Groff. Here. Ms. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Skrull.
Here.
Ms. Cowan.
Here.
Mr. Beltran.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Motion for tonight's agenda? No. I always forget. Only the motion for tonight, right? The agenda. Yeah, sometimes I do it, sometimes.
Yeah.
So first on this evening's agenda are the discussion items from the treasurer, Mr. Morrow.
Don, if you could pull up the attachment. No, you're fine.
So sorry.
So to start off, I wanted to follow up on the board retreat from last week. We talked about financial stability at King's. And one of the things that we talked about was, what does the board need to learn? What does our community need to learn? So I've kind of created a timeline of some things that I'm going to talk about at board meetings along with Mr. Sears. We're going to kind of work on these together. And also we're going to post out to the community at the same time. So first, just kind of a roadmap of this spring prior to school getting out. So the dates align with when we have work sessions and board meetings. So April 19th, next week, take a look at what has happened recently. What are we currently spending? What's the state funding look like? COVID money that we've received. Just go through some of those items and kind of get us up to date on where we're at. May 10th, I'm looking at talking about where does King's get the money that we spend and what are we spending it on? I think it'll be good for the board and the community to take a look at what those look like. And then May 17th, there was a discussion a year ago about having a levy. And we're to that point again where we can have that discussion. So what would that look like? What are some options? And then also, what are some outcomes of that levy? So this is a roadmap for the next 2 months. And I would like any input from the board on anything I'm missing, something else you'd like to see in that time frame. And we did 2 months because we know that school gets out shortly after that, and things kind of change in our world. So we'll pick back up after that.
Can we have some communication out to the community that this is happening
Absolutely.
and might have more participation on watching?
Absolutely. Yes. So around these, we'll post out in the night newsletter, kind of some snippets and also a reminder that's coming up. So hopefully we do get some additional participation and maybe some interest.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then any other methods that you can think would be advantageous, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Next up are the minutes from the March 15th meeting. That was a work session and a regular meeting. If you look on here, we're doing it slightly different. We're utilizing board docs to make the minutes because all the information's already in there. So it comes over and it saves us some time. And if the board has any issue with this method rather than what we did before, we can absolutely go back. So any feedback's appreciated, but it looks clean. And like I said, it's simple on our end. So I don't see any reason why not to, but feedback's appreciated. And if we head to number 3, the financial items, if we could take a look at the attachment titled Financial Summary 322. That's the page. So I spent a lot of my first month at King's really digging into our finances and our operations, just to, I like to say, help paint the picture of the district in my mind, one conversation at a time, one session of me digging into financial information. So I was able to update our current year to date. So we're actual results through March, and then a forecast of April, May, and June. And I was happy to see that it was a continuation of what Mr. Furness and Mr. Porter had been seeing when they were looking at the same information. So there's not a lot of changes on here. I will point out some highlights. In the top right-hand corner, you can see it looks like we're going to operate about $700,000 better than what we originally forecasted in November. That's primarily due to some revenue, some better than expected revenues. So for one, we received our property tax from the county auditor. That came in $100,000 better than we were forecasting, which I must say $100,000 variance on $37,000 in property tax is pretty good. So we were glad to see we got the $100,000 win, but we were right in that ballpark. A couple of the other items that I wanted to point out that caused that $581,000 variance are all other revenues, which is basically a lot of different things all thrown into one line. This includes tuition that we receive if a student is attending King's and they were placed here by ODJFS. This includes the fees that students pay. This is investment income. Just a lot of smaller items kind of all thrown in. And typically we forecast that along the trend in history unless we know of some other big change. So the forecast was basically in line with history. And we had a couple variances that were to our benefit. The tuition that we received from students that are placed at King's was higher than expected. Excess costs, which are students that live outside of King's that go here in our special education, we file against their home district for those extra costs to educate that student. That came in higher than expected. So that really makes up a big portion of that variance. So overall, an excellent job on the November forecast by Mr. Furness, and we're really close to in line when you're talking about over $56 million in revenues. And then on the expense side, we're only projected to be off about $88,000 of a $59 million expense forecast. So we're right there as well. And then the bottom right-hand corner of page 1 shows a minus $2 million. And that's where we're projected to spend $2 million more than we take in for the year. And that'll be the third year in a row where we've spent more than we've brought in. And we'll dig into that a little bit more in the coming months on our presentations. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions so far. To financial item number 4, amended certificate of estimated resources and appropriations. So this is really a compliance item. We have to send the county auditor how much money we expect to have and bring in, and then also how much we expect to spend. So the general fund, our operating fund, that's typically right in line with the forecast unless there's some big change. And then all the other funds are grant funds, lunchroom, student activities, athletics. We typically chart that with prior year activities and then update for current year. And then the grant funds if there are any changes. So this is just a compliance thing, catching us up. We had some changes in the federal grants primarily, and the state does that every year. They'll go in and modify the grant amounts for school districts based on enrollment and a few other factors. Financial item number 5. We are required, just like all schools and all private companies, to pay workers' compensation. So if somebody gets hurt while they're in our employ, they have medical benefits, they have lost time wages potentially. We've contracted with a company called Sedgwick in the past. And basically they handle some of the hearings and those type of paperwork items for us. If we do have an injured employee, cost is very minimal, $2,300 or $2,165. And if you have some claims, it's really a lot of work that they do on our behalf, and they do a great job. I've worked with them for the last 5.5 years. So I highly recommend staying with them for the cost of $2,165. And what you're looking at there is we're what they call penalty rated, meaning that we've had more claims in the past 4 years than they expect a school should have based on your payroll. So we get penalty rated. We pay more than a district that was in line with what they expect would have to pay. So we join a program, and part of that program is if the group as a whole does better than their history, then you'll get some of that money back into the future. We hope to be out of that penalty rating in about a year. We had a meeting today with our workers' compensation people at Sedgwick, and we're trending in the right direction, but for right now, it's pretty expensive to have the insurance. So that graphic's just showing some estimated refunds that we may or may not receive into the future. Then discussion item 6 is the public records log. You can see we had a few in the past month. We have one outstanding, and that gentleman works for a company that gets purchasing information from government entities. So we're working on responding to that one right now. But other than that, we're in good shape.
Anyone have any questions? I had a quick question, Michael, on the Sedgwick. Where are we at on that refund range now? Is that
Those are just projections of
Just
what could
projections?
happen.
Okay.
So we get grouped in. It's called a group retro program.
right?
So it's a bunch of districts similar to us as far as size, being penalty rated. And then if all of us as a whole do well, better than expected, then we could get some of that money back.
Okay.
There hasn't been many refunds actually the last 2 years because the Bureau of Workers' Compensation just gave everybody back their premiums as part of their COVID stimulus.
Gotcha.
If Mr. Furness probably mentioned that in the last couple of years, hundreds of thousands of dollars that were just given back. So these refunds didn't come into play for them because they gave you all the money back. So there was nothing to give you a refund from. But with our trend, we hope to take advantage of some of that.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? Next on this evening's agenda are discussion items from the superintendent, Mr. Sears.
Yes, thank you, President Beltram. Just a quick update. As you know, we have been working through some efforts in our district to identify the essential critical skills that our students need to develop, master, and be able to demonstrate as they navigate through our school district. We know that we have do some great academic work and want to investigate a little bit further what those critical skills are. And I know I presented on last month some of the thought exchange feedback that our parents and our community provided. And since then, we've had a couple weeks ago, we had a community connection event where we had approximately 40 community members attend. And I know some of our board members were present as well. And we navigated through a protocol to drill down to more specifics based on the thought exchange feedback. So with that community connection, they generated a list of about 22 skills that felt like our students needed. And then we had them through a data process where they made some selections on their top 6, each person did. And so what we are doing is we were able to drill that down into more specific information, and some common ones stand out. And I'll just go through those quickly here. I'll have a more formalized presentation in May and I'll talk about why in the next steps of the process. But from the community connection, they identified critical thinking, communication, problem solving, resilience, creativity, acceptance and diversity, emerging technologies, and alternatives to college as some of the top skills that are extremely important for our students to navigate. So since that time frame, we have engaged all of our central office team, our district administrative team, Kings High School, Kings Early Childhood Center, and Kings Mills Elementary staff, all of our staff into the exact same protocol that we use with our community. And so we're all analyzing these across the entire district, and we're doing the same process and drilling down to some of those very specific skills that we want to focus on. And so what I'll present in May after we've completed CIS, SLE, and the junior high. I'll present, okay, here's where we are. We're looking at trends. Some of these skills show up and being identified as key at every location and every group that we meet with. And so those stand out. So we're seeing some trends across the district, but I think it's really important for us to know that, we had over 1,000 parents participate, or community members participate in the initial question. We had an engaged group of people that came on a community night that was very engaging and participative. And then now we're connecting with every staff member in our district to identify what those things are. So our roadmap forward is continuing this work. We're going to drill it down. And I think the entire goal, just to reiterate, is when we think about the future of learning and we think about how we prepare our kids for life beyond the walls of our school district, we have a good academic product. How we do it's important. And so how we do it can lend itself to creating opportunities for kids to master critical thinking skills, master collaboration skills, communication skills. And so embedding that in is really important. And so this will help drive professional learning moving forward for our staff. And so Mrs. Martin and Mr. Freeman are leading a professional development team along with our KEA, some administrators and other leaders within our district here in the coming weeks. And they will begin that process of taking these critical skills that our community and staff have identified. They'll take those and then drill those down into how do we make this happen? What does collaboration need to look like? What does critical thinking look like at 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade? And that will drive the instructional practices moving forward. So there's emphasis on us to grow in our abilities to instruct our students. And these are a little bit of a driver on how you do that. So just to remind the board where we're going, I want to keep this front and center for you, as well as our community. And then we'll have a more formalized, detailed presentation in May after we finish the Columbia and CIS and the junior high. So it's exciting work. I appreciate the engagement of all of our staff into this. They are, we go through and knock out a quick protocol, but they do excellent work with that. So we appreciate their engagement and the community members that have engaged in this process as well. So we're excited about the outcomes that I think are really going to help drive future learning in our school district. So The last one that I have is we will be asking the board to approve next week at our regular meeting, a band trip to Orlando, Florida in November of 22. We have some opportunity to do some different performances and engage into some learning around some of the meeting different groups in that. So we will be asking for an approval for our band to travel to Orlando next November.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Sears. Next on the agenda are discussion items from the Assistant Superintendent regarding HR and business operations topics from Mr. Lucky. So Mr. Spinner, Mr. Lucky.
Thank you, President Belfram, Kings Board of Education. President Belfram, as you mentioned, I have two items on the agenda tonight that I would like to talk about. First is our personnel recommendations that include staff resignations, new employees, staff miscellaneous items, supplementals and stipends, and temporary employment. There are two items of note that I would like to point out to the board under resignations. One is Mr. Brent Allen, our current assistant junior high principal, has submitted his resignation effective October 2nd of next school year. Brent, as many of you may know, is a King's graduate, graduated in 1981, began his teaching career here in 1988, also coached basketball for 16 seasons. 4 of those years he was on varsity, and I would say that he was very qualified since Brent was also in, or is also in, our Athletic Hall of Fame as a basketball player. He has also advised the DC trip for 20 plus years. So we'll be looking for applications for those that would like to advise the DC trip in the future. Don't raise your hands all at once. But I know that Mr. Allen is very much going to miss those things. He's been embedded in our community and will continue to do so and be a proud supporter of the Kings local school district for many years to come. I know that for certain. We also have a retirement from our food service staff, Miss Lillian Chappelle, and Mr. Lucky is going to speak about her.
No, just want to celebrate her retirement. She's been at SLE since I joined the district and has been a fixture for us in the food service world for a long, long time. So wish her all the best. She had to take a leave a while back to start this year, but now she's finally come to a point where she's able to retire. So I want to congratulate her for that.
Thank you, Mr. Lucky. And you will notice under supplementals and stipends, we do have a number of recommendations for Washington, DC chaperones. Our chaperones have the opportunity to either be paid a stipend or collect college education units towards renewing their license in the future. So there are a number of those up for approval this month. That trip takes place May 4th through the 6th. So it is upcoming. And I know a lot of our 8th grade students are very excited about their trip to DC.
This includes the high school freshmen also?
Yes, thank you. Yes, Ms. Phillips, thank you very much. It also includes high school freshmen who, because of the pandemic and COVID regulations, were unable to take a DC trip last year. We are affording them the opportunity to visit DC this year.
Hence the increase in chaperones.
That is correct, yes.
That's what I
Yes.
thought.
Yes.
I just want to thank Mr. Allen as well for his efforts and his leadership for many years in our district. It's been a pleasure to work with him this year. Been so impressed with his passion and dedication for Kings. Sort of one of those iconic figures in our district. You know, and I think my first introduction, I've known Brent for a while, but my first real introduction to his passion in Kings was his ability to navigate and narrate the bus trip for all of our new teachers. We put them on a bus and Brent tells them about every story behind every house and every location. And this gas station used to be here and now it's this. His institutional knowledge of this entire district is amazing. So I would just ask, can we get him back to that? Because it's really good.
No, I appreciate you reminding me of that because yes, he will definitely continue to be. That's not something we will accept a resignation for. Brent will continue to lead
Yeah,
the
it's,
bus tour at the beginning of the
I
school
don't
year.
know how you feel. It's the stories he knows eighth grade friend lived there and my third grade teacher lived there. It's amazing, actually. So
No, it's a great
Anyway, he's
introduction to the district
Yeah,
for our new
absolutely.
teachers. Brett's a great role model. He will be missed, but I know that he'll continue to be in support of our school district going forward. Questions concerning personnel? Second item on the agenda is our quarterly board policy update. We have 10 policies up for a first reading tonight. Of those 10 policies, 9 are revisions, some dating back to 1996. And that's simply to clarify language and or update language to meet or align with Ohio Revised Code. You'll notice that deletions are in red, additions are in green, and there are some very minor adjustments. The one new policy has to do with staff and grooming for our administrative staff. So that's our newest policy. It's nice to know that we have some guidelines for staff and grooming for our administrators. So that's our policy going forward. Questions concerning our board policy update?
Mr. Spinner, can
Yes.
you just briefly explain how these policy update recommendations come to be? Because we have had questions before in public participation, so if you don't mind explaining.
Certainly, I'll be happy to. Every quarter, I receive an email from our representative from Neola, who oversees our board policy. They work very closely with our attorneys, Ennis Britton. And our representative is a retired superintendent by the name of Dr. Norm Burkhart. Dr. Burkhart brings with him the policies that are recommended for adoption to me, or he forwards them to me. I review them and I try to find who would be best to have in the room when he comes from Dayton to meet with me and review those policies. If it's a financial item, I'll ask Mr. Morrow to join me. If it's curriculum, I may ask Mr. Freeman or Ms. Martin. If it's related to business operations, I have Mr. Lucky in the room. We review those policies, make sure that they're items that we can align with. And as I mentioned, they're written by our attorneys. That was one of the reasons why we moved from OSBA to Neola. 2 reasons, actually. One, they're written by Ennis Britton, who are our attorneys, so they know that they're going to align and be supported, and it keeps our liability up to snuff. But then also we get the benefit of working with Dr. Burkhart, who is someone who is incredibly well-versed based on his experience, and this is his full-time job. Now he moves around from district to district, working with HR directors, having those kinds of conversations as we review these policies. We decide which policies are going to be a fit for our district, what updates need to be made, and then we present them to the board for a first reading, which happens during our work session during any given month, and then a second reading when you have the opportunity to approve those policies. Many times, I believe the last quarter we had close to 20 policies. Without looking, I'm guessing that 18 or 19 of those were revisions, updated language to get with the times, but then also align ourselves with the terminology relative to Ohio Revised Code, similar to what we have tonight. We have 10 policies, 9 of them are revisions, some dating back to the late 90s, and 1 being a new policy that just keeps us current with dress and grooming for our administrators.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Hopefully that answered your question.
It does.
I love talking about board policy, so ask me anything, bring it on. All right, thank you, Mrs. Cowan.
So, Mr. Spinner, I
Yes,
do have
sir.
a question. So you had mentioned at times there was maybe 20 of them and 16 to 18 of them were revisions.
Mhm.
Is it typically only about 10% are going to be new then?
Boy, without looking back, I would say a majority. Percentage wise, I would rather not venture to guess, but a majority. And I'll do everything I can every time we have these updates quarterly to point out, just like I did tonight, when we have 10 policies, 9 of them are revisions with simple adjustments in language.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But I feel safe saying it's a majority.
What spurs a new policy?
That's a great question. A lot of times it has to do with either it changes in Ohio Revised Code. Our recommendation this time is staff dress and grooming for administrators is not a great example.
Yeah.
Maybe a new policy would be therapy dogs. Therapy dogs is a recent policy. So as we know, we've adopted therapy dogs in our district. We now have 1 at each of our elementary buildings. And along with that change in addition in our school, we know that that helps us meet the needs of students, their social and emotional needs. So we try to have a policy current with a massive change like that in our school district. So.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Most of them are tied to Ohio Revised Code changes. So if you look on each one, it'll tell you the revised code and the section number, and those are constantly being updated because they may have been approved a long time ago. So it's and then if new case law comes in, that would might prompt a different change. So a lot of that it's responsive based on changes in either statute, revised code, or some of the law. So
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that these were insured through Neola, through Ennis Britton, so they want to make sure that we're aligned with Ohio Revised Code and the law, of course. Thank you. Pass it over to Mr. Lucky.
Dawn, if you wouldn't mind clicking on the first one there. We've got a few things tonight, a couple that we'll get a little more in depth with, but first one is the layout in front of KME, but right outside the window here. Just give you a Cliff Notes version of what's going on out here and the benefits that we'll see. So let's start from the west or the left of the page, coming in left field of the ball field. So coming down the street, you'll see roughly where the project's going to start, right at our almost westerly property line. Coming in, we'll now have a left turn lane into KME, which will be a huge help during our pickup and drop off times. Continuing on, you'll see, I guess the next thing, you'll see a left-hand turn lane to get into KEC. As you continue down, you'll have another left-hand turn lane that doesn't exist now to get into our bus lot. And then north of that, you'll have a right-hand, I'll call it a cool-down lane to get into the KME entrance down to your left if you're moving that cursor, that right-hand turn lane to get into the KME parent drop-off entrance. So this should really alleviate all, if not most, if not all, of our traffic congestion out there in the mornings and afternoons at pickup and drop-off. Continuing out, you'll notice something a little bit newer at the bus lot entrance. So the College Street and our KME alignment will be better from a safety perspective. That's very big. When you have those staggered entrances, can create an issue if two people are trying to turn left out of each location. So you'll see a left and a straight and then a right to get out of there of our bus lot. And continuing to the east, you'll see the left-hand turn lane to get into College Street, where those two are, you'll see a slight curve at the end of College to align, and then going down into the roundabout. So the roundabout softens that curve a little bit out there. We'll keep traffic moving like it currently does on down to the bridge project. So this project is going to do a whole lot for the amount of traffic that we're going to see once that bridge is open. It's going to be a big deal to be able to get our folks in and out of there quickly and out of the way and keep traffic moving for the volume of vehicles that we'll see once the bridge is there, and you can get dump truck, semi-truck, bus traffic, which will also be very helpful for us. So all in all, we're very excited. Deerfield Township really stepped up to the plate here. This is a Warren County road. So we want to thank Deerfield Township for taking part of this. This is, if road improvements are not cheap ventures. So they've invested a lot, and we're very appreciative of how they listened to us. They work with Mr. Sears and myself because it did not look like this at the start. So we sat down, had great conversation, had some requests. They made some adjustments that are very much appreciated by us.
Estimated completion?
It's a moving target. We're continuing to meet. I'll have more information. The big thing now, you can see to the west of KC here, the pipe work that's made it across the street up into the park. And it will continue. They're in a little bit of a spot because they're kind of waiting for us to finish school as well. So it's hurry up and get to about 3 o'clock and then put the plates down and get out of the way. So they'll be very glad once school lets out here in a little bit. If you've all been down by the Powder Factory Bridge, if you have not, it's worth a trip.
Yes.
Be very careful because it's a very different look down there right now with the clearing that's gone on and the movement of earth, and very excited to get that project going.
But based on this map, Mr. Lucky, looks like we create this road over here to King's Mansion? Or-
There will be an access road that's coming off of our bus lot entrance. So what you see over there currently is, we'll call that 15 feet tall berm
Right.
with pine trees. That will look very much different to get that access point. There'll be a parking lot added over there for the park users, which is also helpful for us because we get a lot of park folks that use our teacher parking lot to get on the walking path over there. So it should help alleviate some of that.
Now, will that entire berm be going away or just where that road's?
I think just where the entrance is going in.
Okay.
So they'll have to feather up, feather down, and there'll be some dirt getting moved there.
It'll be nicer not having to worry, and am I going down the little road for the park? Or am I gonna end up in the mansion's garage?
Yes, yes. Well, and the good news is the project's going to improve some storm drainage really all around here, but specifically on that bus drive that will be taken care of by the project and not us. Benefit there.
So is there, I'm sorry, I'm back on Mrs. Groff's question earlier, is there a place where community members can go to get, no, it's not fair for us to keep asking you, but where they can see, updates from ODOT or from the Deerfield Township, see where they are with it?
Let me dig into that and I'll circle back next week with some info where folks can go. As an assumption, I'd say the Warren County Engineers website as well as Deerfield Township, but I'll confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next item there, the county easement, Warren County county easement. This is just the completion of what you voted on last month for the right of way, so that we'd have record of that. Next item, number 5, is payment in lieu of transportation. We had one more addition to some folks that would be prorated for the year, so you'll see those periodically. Payment in lieu of will happen in September once the state says the amount. I believe the number is 538 now. It used to be 250, so they've increased that substantially. But again, it's much cheaper than $60,000 for a bus route.
Yep, so if you could, Mr. Lucky, just give us that quick cliff notes as to what payment in lieu of transportation is.
So payment in lieu, any district that we deem as impractical, if we're not taking students there, if we can't combine it with other routes, we will offer payment in lieu of transportation to families. It's by student, so if you have 5 kids, you multiply it by 5. The state has a minimum amount that you have to pay those families to provide their own transportation. So we go to a lot of places. I'd say we cover a lot of ground, and our transportation department does a really good job of combining routes where school start and finish times can be combined. But we're always trying to be efficient with that. It's a challenge when you send a bus that holds 60 kids with 10 people on it. So we're always trying to combine and work with the schools. Everybody does a really nice job of working together to make that as good as it can. We partner with other districts, so we have kids from Little Miami come. If we're going there anyway, we take those kids there. It's a nice thing to do. Last thing, number 6, you'll see the SLE chiller and ice tank replacement proposal from Train. On the front end of this, you guys just see here what the proposal that we chose was, the work that went into it. We've actually, as a rule of thumb, we have typically made ice and burnt ice during the day. So those of you that aren't HVAC aficionados, there's a lot of things going on in the HVAC world as far as efficiency and driving down costs. So we looked at really every model of delivery of chiller options for this project, and we actually made a small change that became more cost effective for us on this one. So typically the projects that we've done, we go chiller ice combined. So what we'll do is we will make ice at night when the electricity peak time isn't there. So we'll make ice at the cheapest rate that we can and then burn ice through the heat of the day when electricity is very expensive. So when your house is running, there's we'll pull on the grid, we're burning the ice that we made and not pulling so much electricity to cool the buildings. So it's more cost effective. On this program, we looked at full ice and a chiller. That cost was about $500,000 as an option. And in savings in the baseline from our bill, so from our usage, was only about $4,500. We looked at no ice at all and just chillers only. The cost of the chiller itself was only $422,000, but there was a net cost monthly in the cost to do that because you don't have ice to burn in the peak of about $900. And then what we landed on is a little bit different. So we're doing partial ice storage and chiller. And the total is $415,000, but over the baseline cost, it's about $12,000 savings a year. So you'll never get to the payback time when it comes to the cost of these chillers, but we want to be as efficient as we can. So the savings is there. That chiller plant is original to the building. The ice tanks are original to the building. We're at a point where we can get through cooling season this year for a couple reasons. One, supply chain is, I'll call it a nightmare for these manufacturers. We can't get a chiller. We've been talking about this project for a long time, working on the different modes of delivery. So this will be a wintertime install. It actually works in our favor, I think, a little bit for cost because there's not a whole lot of chillers going in during the winter time. It's out of our way, so it doesn't affect the daily use of the building, and we can get the chiller in there. There's nothing worse than trying to figure out what's going on in cooling season, trying to get a chiller installed during cooling season, because those guys are getting pulled in all different directions. So the time that it takes then can be pretty painful. So we landed on, I think, the best package that we can land on for this project. Any questions?
What's the projected lifespan for a chiller installed today?
Yeah, it's kind of like your house. There's hope. There's a lot of hope involved in a chiller.
That's why I said projected.
Yes, yes.
I'm
So
open to it.
typically with these kind of chillers, you're looking 16 would be not great. We start creeping into that 20-year deal, kind of like your house. When you start getting past 20 years, you're living on borrowed time and you're hoping it doesn't go down on you on July 10th.
Yeah. So are we, Matt or Mr. Lucky, how comfortable are you with the existing chiller? You know, I have those flashbacks. So we're hoping that one's going to last us till, and it sounds like you're going to do the same thing Christmas break.
Mhm.
Going to put in.
So I'll tweet out the crane pictures of
Gotcha.
holiday break
Gotcha.
stuff flying in.
How do you decide maintenance schedule to keep your chiller running? And then what happens when it breaks before you're ready to outlay the money for a new one?
So it's a gamble. So you're always trying to time it up the best you can, because I'm the tightest human, you know. So there's nothing worse than thinking that, hey, I might get 5 more years out of my air conditioner at home or my chiller at the school, and to replace it, and you just lost 5 years of life out of it. So there's a dance that we do there. And the nice thing about the size of these chillers, there's multiple compressors in them. So compressors start to go down. You can repair compressors or not. Compressors are about $28,000 depending on the size, plus or minus. So as you start going through there, things start needing repair, needing service. We PM those chillers and ice tanks on the front end and the back end, just like you do your house. You're cleaning coils, you're scraping out any of the, we deal with a lot of, I call it fur, just from the weeds. So we'll scrape everything down, clean coils, make sure everything's breathing properly. And those guys can test the efficiency of the chiller as it's going. So as we start to see that thing deteriorate, then we start those conversations of, all right, where are we throwing bad money at this thing, replacing compressors from an efficiency perspective. Nice thing about the new one, you can see it's a $12,000 a year savings just in the efficiency of the unit. So you just have to weigh the efficiency versus the total cost, and then you start working on comfort. There's nothing worse than little kids. Like the kids, they deal with it. Teachers, not so well. So and it's just miserable. We all know if the air is not great, what it's like coming in from recess and dealing with it. So we want to make sure that classroom environment is as good as it can be, so everybody's being productive.
So sounds like this is one that you've already have had on the list as far as this will need replacing, so PI money.
Mm-hmm. The other side of it is trying to even flow these large expenditures. There's our PI fund could not survive if we just did it all at one time. There's no way. So these chillers at a little less than $500,000 at a time, we try to stagger. That way we don't have to put them all in at once and then replace them all at once. I'm trying to press these out a little bit and do one at a time.
What year was SLE built?
Oh my goodness.
Because that's the original chiller, correct?
It was like
2000.
right around 2002.
Yeah.
2000,
Yeah.
2001.
Yeah. So we're ready.
Got it.
So what school's next and what's the timeline? So we don't have to do them all at once,
Mhm.
staggered what,
Yeah.
what's next on the horizon?
Great. Well, I'll go backwards first if it's okay. So we started with Canny. It's about 4 years ago, Mr. Belfram. Is that your first year?
Yes. Yeah.
Welcome. Then we moved to here. So we replaced this chiller. Following that, we did JF Burns. Then last year we did the junior high. This year's SLE. We'll move to Columbia as that one starts to show. And then the high school will be the last one in the mix. Chillers are probably the biggest expense of any item. Roofs will pick off sections, but when those chillers go, it's about half of that intake of PI for the year. So next week, we will vote. I'll ask you guys to vote on the payment in lieu of and the chiller project.
Any further questions? Mr. Spinner, Mr. Love? Thank you, gentlemen. Next on the agenda, we have discussion items from the Assistant Superintendent regarding educational programs. I believe we have Mrs. Martin and Mr. Freeman here to discuss.
Good evening. I was trying to come up with something witty about chillers and ice, but I can't. So there's nothing to do there now. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Freeman, who's going to talk about instructional materials.
Dazzle you with some new novels that we are looking to review. So there are 4 novels listed there actually that we're just introducing to you tonight. We haven't actually started the review process quite yet, but we will be beginning this review process very soon and be coming to you over the next several months as we complete these reviews of these books and make recommendations. So there are 4 titles here. And there are 3 different classes actually. So the first one is Little Fires Everywhere, which you may have heard of. It was a Netflix, I believe, series. So this is the novel that series is based on by Celeste Ng. And this is looking to be added to the college reading and writing curriculum. The next 2 are for English 11, Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson and Trevor Noah, Born a Crime.
are two novels for, again, English 11. And then Echo by Pam Munoz Ryan. If you ever have heard of Esperanza Rising, this is the same author. So this is quite a long book, but we're looking at adding this to our resource English class at the high school as a class-wide read for them. So they haven't had any new materials in quite a while, and so this would be kind of an addition to that. So as we bring some materials to you, we'll do that in the same format that we have this year. This is, again, just an introduction. And then we'll come to the work session the month before we ask you to vote on that, to make sure that you have plenty of time to get the details, and we'll be sharing more information as we come. So not asking you to vote on anything this month. Just wanted to kind of give you a heads up that we'll be reviewing those. And if you have any questions or if you'd like to see them yourselves, happy to let you borrow a copy. Any questions on those?
Yeah, can you repeat what classes those would be for?
Yeah, sure. So Little Fires Everywhere is college reading and writing. Echo is a 912 resource English class. And the other two, Trevor Noah's Born a Crime and Just Mercy, are for CP English 11.
Thank you.
And the next item that we have is actually installment 3 from our Spanish adoption that we did a few years ago. So initially, when we had the Senderos collection board approved, we kind of stepped back on our order because of the expense and lots of other things happening on in the district at the time. So we've been rolling this out. First started in the 1920 school year with Senderos 1 for our Spanish 1 class, which is our largest grouping of students actually in the world language area. And then this year we brought in level 2, and then next year we bring in level 3. So just wanted to kind of bring that up. We would like to get this ordered soon so we can make sure that we have it on hand for the classes and students to enjoy next school year. That one would be for a vote. Yes, next week.
And is that actually for Spanish 3 or
Spanish
what?
3, yes.
Is there an honors class that it's
It is for
this-
both. Yeah, Spanish 3 and honor Spanish 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions? Thank you, Mrs. Martin. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Next on the agenda are items presented by the board. Do we have any items to present?
I just want to say that right now we have a high school Washington DC meeting going on as we speak, and bringing up Mr. Allen and Mr. Leist. I want to just thank both of them for making Washington DC possible for 2 entire grades of our students this year. And I mean, Mr. Allen always does an amazing job, but the fact that Mr. Leist stepped up to get our freshmen to be able to go really means a lot. So thank you to both of those gentlemen.
Absolutely, yeah. The logistics for the DC trip, I don't know how they do it. Next on the agenda is executive session. We enter into executive session for the following purposes. Matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or state statute, for example, FERPA. Preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation, public employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Skrull,
Yes.
Mr. Belfram.
Yes. We are now exiting out of executive session, and I need a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting.
I will make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Morrow,
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Skrull,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom.
yes.